So I'm going to be showing you guys the Saboteur Deadeye. This is a sword dagger shortbow Deadeye build with a lot of boon stealing and boon gain. So you're gaining tons of boons from stealing and also just giving yourself them from your build. And it allows you to gain a really high DPS, which is really good in this patch. And it's not as hard countered because burst builds are not as bursty as they used to be. And this was an archetype before, but it was kind of bullied out by other thieves because they were just more aggressive with their burst. So yeah, now this can kind of see a little bit more play, especially in 2v2s where Firebrand Rev is meta, right? Because this kind of like is the counter to Firebrand, right? Because it steals so many boons and it kind of like buffs you up. And you have so much unblockable with sword dagger. So yeah, you take Eagle rune, Marauders, pretty standard. Enhancement sigil because you have tons of boons, and Revocation because you just want to remove as many boons as possible. But you can also take Exploitation just for more damage. Shortbow, cleansing energy. The reason why I use shortbow is because instead of rifle, which is it's kind of like a aggressive option, but the thing is rifle is too one-dimensional. So how initiative works in this game is all your weapon skills kind of like share a cooldown. So you want to have skills that do different kinds of things, because if you ever want to do one thing, then you just spam that ability. So when you have a rifle and sword dagger, you have a lot of like single target focus, which means you don't have a lot of options, right? But even though I do have a lot of options with shortbow, because I can go single target damage with the sword dagger. If I want to just do single target damage, I just spam 3 on sword dagger. And if I am Deadeye, well then I'm still focusing one target, but it's just changing the fact that I'm ranged or melee. So it's really not that many options to have rifle. And in 2v2s, they're even fights, so you can't really get too much value off of the kneel mechanic because they're just going to focus you, right? So you want something that can kite and do damage at the same time, and that's shortbow. And especially in conquest too, where you want the mobility, and you can't really +1 as well in 2v2, right? But you can in conquest. So rifle might be a little bit better in conquest, but I still feel shortbow is like comparably, if not better, in conquest too. So yeah, that's the sigils, rune, and amulet. The build is trickery. You take the normal stuff in trickery. You gain thrill of the crime, which is just boons when you steal even if you miss, and bountiful theft, which is steal 2 boons and give them to allies around you. You want to be careful of your positioning with this too, because it shares the boons to your allies that are around you, not around your target. However, it's generally better to steal in a safe spot than in the middle of a team fight, just to give it to your allies, right? Because your steal it has a cast time, so it just can easily get blinded or stuff if you're in the middle of a team fight. So yeah, that's just something to remember. And yeah, it gives you vigor as well. So potentially you can get 6 boons from pressing your steal, because you get 3 here, and if you don't steal vigor or fury or might or swiftness, then you'll get 6 boons, right? Which is really nice because that's more damage for other traits and enhancement sigil. And obviously sleight of hand, which reduces your steal, because your steal, as you're going to see soon, is really high value as a Deadeye. It's probably the most valuable to any spec. So, and the daze is also for playmaking, right? It's really important. In deadly arts, you're going to have mug, which is just a no-brainer. Your steal is going to do a little bit of damage here and there, and it heals you for still 2k damage. That was unnerfed, so it's pretty good sustain. I take even the odds for the Vallun on steal and the might when I do a sneak attack. the sneak attacks for this build are pretty important, but they don't really happen that often. But you can go Panic Strike as well for the poison on Immobilize. You actually do immobilize quite a bit with Sword 2 and Shortbow auto, and that'll give Vuln, which is pretty important. Or sorry, it gives weakness. It gives weakness when you poison people. And yeah, that's really important for preventing power builds from counter pressuring you, and just it also reduces their endurance regeneration. So Panic Strike is really good too, but obviously just stealing to someone will also give them the weakness. So it's maybe not as optimal, but it's still good if you want to maximize your weakness uptime. And then you have Improv. This is really important because when you have no cooldowns as a thief, you're pretty much dead. So making sure you always have cooldowns keeps you alive. And the double stolen ability is super important for Deadeyes because your stolen abilities are your bread and butter, and you'll see that in a little bit here as well, because they are really long range and they do a decent amount of damage and have some effects that really help you out. So the ability to just kind of like spam out the stolen abilities and having more of them because you have Improv is really good. So in Deadeye, you take one in the chamber. This gives you more stolen abilities. When you use a cantrip, which is just more damage over time, more effects, more stealth, as you'll see in a little bit as well, because whenever you have 5 malice or more, you gain stealth whenever you use a stolen ability. So that's really important for the sneak attack mechanic, and just in general having the ability to peel for yourself and kite. So premeditation here gives you bonus damage per boon, so you gain 1% damage increase per boon. So as I said before, you could get 6 potentially boons when you steal to a target. This one doesn't have any boons on it, so I only get 4, but that's 4% damage increase. It's pretty good. And yeah, that's just pretty good. And because I'm not using the rifle trait, it doesn't even matter. I'm not using rifles. So here's where the build comes together. Maleficent 7. This trait is really high value, and because the meta has slowed down a bit, you can finally take advantage of it. So Be Quick or Be Killed has been nerfed to 2 seconds of quickness instead of 4, and while I think that they should increase that back to 4 seconds of quickness and then just give it an internal cooldown, that would kind of be a better decision, because then you can't just like get too much quickness, but you can't really do much with 2 seconds of quickness anyways, right? So yeah, it feels kind of not that good, but Maleficent 7 is really good because whenever you gain max malice cap, which is 7, you will gain all of these boons. So if I steal to a target and then I get to 7 malice, I've got 6 boons on me. So that's really good. Yeah, so it gives you 6 boons, which gives you more damage from premeditation and enhancement sigil, and it also gives you 7 initiative, so it allows you to kind of just like keep going with your damage, and in a way it gives you like kind of spam ability to just kind of like keep going, and it gives you more evades because initiative is evades, and also like they nerfed a lot of the initiative costs on Shortbow weapons as well, so that kind of makes up for that as well. And how you're going to want to play around Maleficent 7 is you don't necessarily want to only play around that, right? So like you want to, the objective of the game is to kill the opponent, right? It's not to get to 7 malice. So if you're going to use a skill that's going to do more damage rather than a skill that's going to give you more malice, it's generally better to do that, right? But there are some ways to get Malice very reliably, right? So Dancing Dagger is pretty easy to do because it's, if you're somewhat medium range to the target, it'll usually hit. If you're long range and they're moving, it might not hit. So you got to be careful with that. Obviously, Cloak and Dagger is one of the ways to remove Malice, not one of the ways to gain Malice. So you got to be careful with that. And then Flanking Strike is really good for gaining Malice because generally you're spamming that on your target and you can get a lot of hits of it in. And you gain 2 Malice if you crit and 1 Malice if you don't crit. So yeah, we have plenty of Fury. We have 90% crit chance. So yeah, you crit very often. In Shortbow, Maleficent 7 is really nice as well because it allows you to kind of use Shortbow as a DPS weapon because you don't really run out of initiative ever. So like you Malice up the target, you just spam Cluster Bomb, and Cluster Bomb deals like 3k damage per hit, which is pretty good after patch for a 3 initiative skill. And then once you've got your maximum Malice, you can go in stealth with your ranged stolen ability and then use your Immobilize to reset your Malice, and then you can keep spamming Cluster Bombs and just get more damage that way. And just spamming Cluster Bombs like this does insane damage and allows you to have really good positioning at the same time because Cluster Bomb is independent of your character, right? I can do it over here, I can do it over there, and I can hit regardless of where I am. But you know, Rifle, I have to be facing the target, so my movement is a little bit constrained. And yeah, just having Shortbow is really nice. You also have like the insane utility of, right, Choking Gas with Cleave. So you have a lot of AoE, right? And as I mentioned before, skills that do the same thing on multiple weapons, you usually don't want to have those as a thief. You want to have weapons that do different things. So that's why Shortbow is like pretty much bread and butter for thieves because it does so many things that other weapons don't do. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You have really good down cleave with Shortbow, and you're able to kite and deal damage at the same time with it. So it's really good, especially in 2v2 where there's so much terrain and it's really hard for you to get value off of the kneel mechanic because you're going to get counter pressured basically. No one's going to let you free cast in a 2v2 because the map is so small, right? So Shortbow's really good. And yeah, so how you kind of play with Sword Dagger in this build is you'll generally want to steal early on to get your stolen abilities, but at the beginning of a fight, you're often facing the most evasion, right? Because near the beginning of a fight is when everyone has their cooldown, so they usually evade near the start. So if you've engaged on them and you haven't used steal yet, they're generally going to dodge your steal, right? So what you want to do is you want to go in, maybe you haven't stolen yet, and then you want to pressure out like a dodge or something. So like I'll go in and flanking strike. Most people will dodge flanking strike. So right after you flanking strike, if you land your flanking strike, don't go into larcenous strike immediately. Wait for them to dodge, because they'll probably try to dodge the larcenous strike too. And then right after their dodge, you want to steal. And then once you've stolen, you've got 2 stolen abilities which do plenty of damage over time and give you nice boons and effects that'll give you a lot of sustain. And you want to just keep going in with your sword 3 generally, and that does a lot of damage and rips boons, which will give you more sustain and damage. And if you want to remove your malice, you can go for the cloak and backstab effect to remove your malice and then go for more. Or what you can do is you can use mercy, which is really good because it's kind of hard to land Cloak and Dagger into Tactical Strike because Cloak and Dagger is such a clunky, it's not really that clunky, but right, it's like one of the harder skills to land. So what you can do is use Mercy, and that will reset your malice, and it'll also give you a ton of malice. So it's sort of like a secondary Maleficent 7, right, with Mercy. So you really have a lot of initiative gain with this build, because this gives you 1 initiative per malice that you had. So if you have 7 malice, you'll gain 10 initiative because it's 3 plus malice. It's also a stun break and allows you to steal again. So it's just it's something that allows you to just keep going constantly. You just always have resources. So it's really good. And yeah, otherwise, depleting your malice can be a little bit difficult sometimes. You don't want to focus on depleting the malice too much, because sometimes that can often deplete you even more of your other resources. So you kind of want to do what is convenient to you. So Shortbow is really convenient to removing your malice. And otherwise, yeah, you just want to play around killing the opponent, not around getting your malice or your initiative up, right? So like, say you have maximum malice and you're gonna kill someone. You don't want to, like, if I just spam sword 3 and I would finish someone off, and I've got maximum malice, I don't need to go for like a risky play and try to remove my malice. I could just go for the kill, right? Because that's what you really want to do. So oftentimes you're not going to go for Maleficent 7 value. It's sort of like beginning of the engagement kind of value thing. And like, if you get in a situation where the kill is maybe not going to come to fruition very soon, then you want to go for like a sneak attack with Shortbow and kind of reset your initiative and resustain, and then maybe go in a little bit later. So yeah, playing around your Maleficent 7 can sometimes be a little bit too complicated because of how conquest works. There's all these objectives, so it's kind of difficult to focus on that while there's all these other things going on. So yeah, you don't want to focus too much on your malice generation, but it is there. And yeah, there's just some things to remember are, so like, if you have your 2 stolen abilities and you use Mercy, you will reset those 2 stolen abilities and only gain 1 because of this trait, which will give you 1. So you always want to spam out your stolen abilities immediately, right? Because like, if I have 2 and then I use Mercy, I now have 1. Also, when you use Mercy, you have your steal again, but you gain 1 stolen ability. So after you use Mercy, you generally want to use, like, you immediately want to use F2. So you Mercy, then F2, and then steal, because the steal will override that 1 as well. You'd want to get as much value off your stolen abilities as possible, because it's just doing constant pressure to your target basically for free. So yeah, that's pretty important. And yeah, you just can do stuff with your shadow meld to get a reliable removal of your malice stacks if you really need to. And you also get an extra stolen ability when you use shadow meld, right? So you gain stealth, and then you can gain even more stealth, because when you have 5 or more malice, you gain stealth on using a stolen ability. Just be careful about revealing yourself if you're already in stealth, because it can do damage. And yeah, so stolen abilities are really good. Some of them in particular that are important in this meta are the Revenant stolen ability, which will give you resistance, which is really nice. And obviously the meta for revs right now is Condi Rev, so the resistance kind of like counters them. This one actually for Ranger gives you immobilize on them, so that's really nice. Thieves, if you steal to a thief, it's really good, because say this is a thief stolen ability and I'm not even targeting the thief because they're in stealth, you can actually put blind on them, because the stolen ability is blind, and it would blind them even if they're in stealth like that. I don't need to be targeting them. So that's really good for countering like stealth thieves, right? Because that build of like a DP thief or some kind of like stealth thief actually counters this. So that's kind of how you can counteract that. And yeah, just in general, if you want to, there's just one thing you can do where if you have max malice and you're in stealth and you can't swap to shortbow because you want to stay in sword, but you also don't want to make it too obvious that you're going to go in for the sneak attack. What you can do is use the stealth, press 2, press 5, then press 1. So I didn't do it correctly there, but basically you cannot stow Infiltrator Strike. So if I go in and I press 2 and then stow, it keeps casting. So pressing Infiltrator Strike and then pressing 5 is actually how you cancel it. But Cloak and Dagger will then cast, so you need to press 2, then 5, and then stow the 5, like this. So 2, 5, and then stow the 5. But you also don't need to stow the 5 necessarily, because you can just spam 1 and it'll do that instead. So so stealth, 2, 5, and then 1, and then I remove all my malice like that. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This is a really nice build for 2v2s because it's pretty sustainable and it's really nice for unblockable larcenous strikes. And Firebrand is obviously the meta right now. And it's also pretty good in Conquest, so yeah. So yeah, this is a pretty cool sword dagger thief build. I think you can make the same thing work on Daredevil, and I'll probably be looking at the staff as well for Daredevil because that seems to be pretty good as well. So if you like this kind of content, like the video, give me a comment down below if you think that sword dagger Deadeye is good, if you think it's bad, if you think it's small PP, or if you think that there's another build that's in the meta that's kind of sleeper that no one has yet discovered.